Us. We're going to talk about bioethics. You know how it goes with Father Tad. He's a scientist, he's a priest, and if you have questions about bioethics, he is the guy to ask. He works over at the National Catholic Bioethics Center. This hour, man, we haven't seen her in a long time. She's a scientist, she's a theologian, Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, Cy. It's very good to be back here with you again.
It is indeed. The last time I spoke with you, I was on your podcast with Bishop Strickland, and thank you for inviting me. I really had a good time.
No, thank you for doing that, and thank you for writing your book. It was fun to be interviewing you for a change, and it was great. I love hearing what you have to say. I could listen to you talk all day long.
Well, that's very kind to say. I definitely got the sense doing conversations about that book that it's way easier to be the interviewer than the interviewee. It's way easier. So I'm in that role now. So we're going to talk about faith and science. When Dr. Stacy is here, you can ask any question at all about faith and science. She's a PhD in chemistry and also a theologian. And her science didn't lead her away from God, but to God. Is that fair enough to say that?
Yes, I always say chemistry led me to God. Someone said, "Why do you have faith in Jesus Christ?" And I said, "Because of atoms." ATOMS. It really was a fascination with the order and beauty and superhuman logic in the universe that forced me to admit there was a greater chemist than any human could be.
Yeah, and one of Stacy's books is Particles of Faith. It's a Catholic guide to navigating science, also now available in the student edition. So you might want to look into that for your student or students. Our number is 888-318-7884. If you'd like to talk about the conflict or the so-called conflict between faith and science, you're welcome to call. If you are not a believer at all, if you maybe look at science as canceling God or removing the need for God, and you'd like to talk about that, we love those conversations. Make it as hard as you can because Stacy has to answer them. 888-318-7884. I don't have to answer them. 888-318-7884, the number. It feels to me like people like yourself, with your book, Particles of Faith, and all the speaking that you've done, have actually made a difference over the last 10 or so years in that it feels like fewer people are dedicated or committed to the idea that there's a conflict between faith and science than there were, say, in the early 2000s or 2010.
You are absolutely right, and it's so good to hear you say that because I know you pay attention to these things in culture. It is changing. Like, I think Catholics finally said, science was born of Christianity, and we're taking it back and stop this nonsense with this. We just blew the cobwebs off of that tired old myth. We just said enough already. We're not going to keep being on the defensive, trying to say, "Oh yes, it's okay if you have faith and you also love science." Just stop all that nonsense and say, "Look, science is the study of the handiwork of God." The end. There's no conflict there. We're studying what our Creator created. Period.
Again, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. It even seems like the opponents of faith who turned to science were well organized in say the 1990s. They really started, and it took a while for Catholics to get organized. But there's even this thing. I don't know if I think you're a member of it. The Society of Catholic Scientists. You're a member of that. Is that correct? Yeah. And it just seems like we're getting organized. And I feel like this is a good news story that we should share because we're always like, oh, so many people have given up on religion and whatnot. When we make the case for it, it actually makes a difference. People respond.
Yeah, I mean, science, modern science, like what we know about the atom and quantum mechanics and biology and evolution and chemistry, the periodic table, all of those things, they ought to be our strongest evangelization tool of today. Like, there is no better way than to look at the world and say, look, the more we learn about science, the more we're amazed by it, the more we are compelled to admit what St. Paul was saying in the Bible and what the early Christians said is that the order and the nature is evidence of the existence of God. And the more we learn about science, the more we have to be able to say that. We're not like the early Christians who didn't even have a self-sustaining discipline called modern science. They didn't have cell phones and, Honda Accords. They just looked at nature, but that was enough for them to be convinced there's evidence of God. All the more so today. We should be saying.
Right, indeed, 888-318-7884. I think statistically most Christians today still don't have Honda Accords. I'm just throwing that. I hate to throw statistics out at you, but.
My next car is going to be a Ford Mustang.
Oh, all right. That's you need a car that can get you around Texas. Because one thing I didn't mention about Dr. Stacy Trasanko, scientist and theologian, is she's also the executive director of Bishop Joseph Strickland's St. Philip Institute of Catechesis and Evangelization down there in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. Again, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. We're talking about faith and science, whether you come at it from a nope, I don't have faith, and I believe that science contradicts faith, or help me out to understand how these go together, you're welcome to call. Whether you're a believer or unbeliever, Catholic or not a Catholic, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I do feel like, however, that as much as there's so much good news in the way that, as I said, people like yourself, people like Dr. Stephen Barr, who started the Society of Catholic Scientists, and many other Catholics who finally got into the conversation, the public conversation about faith and science, so that it's not just a conversation between a few fundamentalist Christians and a few atheists, but that people of a broader perspective got into the conversation. There are still a lot of, I don't know, let me put it this way. I guess middle schoolers or high schoolers who are constantly seeing the memes and whatnot, and we're just not very good at memes. We're definitely not as good as the atheists. They're better at memes. How do we reach young people to make sure we don't lose them before, to lose to a meme, a person who really we didn't need to lose?
Yeah, you know what? I have concluded after talking about this for so long. I mean, first of all, if you can get to a high school or a college science class, you can say, look, science is the study of the handiwork of God, and you can inspire those young Catholics to remain true to their faith when they get to the laboratory. But when it comes to other young people who are like the nuns, I don't know if even you can talk to them about science and you can say, isn't that evidence of a creator? But I think what's really fundamentally the problem with them is we just don't teach our kids how to think anymore. They just too easily put those hard questions up on the shelf and don't want to talk about it because they have so many other things with the internet and the global communication to worry about.
Yeah.
It's hard to get them to think about it. So you can start talking to them about science, but you're first going to have to get them past that hurdle of even wanting to think critically about the question of God. That's what I find.
There's just one line open left to talk to Dr. Stacy Trasanko, scientist and theologian. 888-318-7884 is the number. Let's head up to Seattle, Washington. Patrick, listening on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app. You're first up. Go ahead with your question or comment for Dr. Stacy.
Yes, hello, Doctor. The question that I had was, the German Catholic Church right now is objecting to the Vatican's direction on blessing same-sex unions, and they point to various scientific studies about psychology and biology, the fact that a certain percentage of the population is born with a natural inclination towards the same sex. And psychologically working against that is ultimately harmful. That's their position. I'm not advocating for that personally, but I was wondering what your response to that would be.
I was actually on the show a couple of years ago, Cy. Remember when I came to California and I was in person on the show, and we were talking about in that show a new study that came out about the gay gene. There was this big study done to assess whether or not there actually was a genetic contribution to a person being born with homosexual tendencies or not. And they were unable to find a gay gene. They were unable to correlate people that they interviewed their experience of ever desiring to have sex with the same gender with a person's genetic makeup. There was no correlation. Instead of concluding that there is no connection between genetics and the vast majority of people who say they're gay actually being born that way, instead of concluding that there is no connection, they went the other way and they said, well, the connection is there, it's just too complex for us to be able to study right now. So they furthered that narrative that most of those people with those tendencies are born that way. And you know, I want to leave open the possibility that some people may actually have those struggles and they can't help it. I do think there are people that are that way. I just don't think the majority of people who come out now saying, you know, today I'm gender nonconforming, tomorrow I'm a boy, the next day I'm a girl. It happens. I have 4 teenage daughters. It's everywhere. I don't think there's anything to that. There is nothing biological about that. It is certainly seems like some orchestrated effort to just confuse our young people into losing their own identity.
We'll tell you what we'll do, Patrick. We'll put in the show notes a link to that earlier show we did on the gay gene. Thanks very much for the question. We're doing Science and Faith this hour with Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian. Your call's welcome, 888-318-7884. Right back after this.
Call us now with your question. Hello? On Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Hey, it's Wednesday, and that means a new episode of our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus, has dropped. You can check it out at CatholicAnswersFocus.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Catholic Answers Focus, the world's premier podcast on Catholic apologetics, now available every Wednesday at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
The EWTN home video highlight for July is A Church in Crisis. The church is under attack from within and from without. Through the chaos, Dr. Ralph Martin illuminates the path forward for a church in crisis. Order your DVD set at EWTNRC.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. For some reason, it feels like forever since we've had Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian, on, but that's how it goes sometimes. But we're just delighted to have her back with us, and we're just doing a general faith and science program today, not on a specific science or faith question. If you have a question about anything that has to do with the conjunction of faith and science, or the disjunction of the two, if you prefer that, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. One thing I forgot to mention, there's a 20 Answers sale on right now, so I want to mention that before I go back to the callers. If you get 50% off on any 20 Answer book you buy right now at shop.catholic.com, just head over there. You'll see the 50% off, and they're very inexpensive books anyways. I know that we've tried to make them as cheap as we can make them. I think they're $2 or $3 each, and you're going to get 50% off right now at shop.catholic.com. Have you ever written any of the 20 Answers books, Stacey? I think you did one on bioethics, didn't you?
Yeah, I did the bioethics one.
Yeah, so see, we got world-class authors over there on those 20 Answers books. Right now we go to Rochester, New York. Michael, listening on the Station of the Cross. You are up next. Michael, go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasenkos.
Well, I'm a math teacher at a small Christian Catholic school here in Rochester, New York. And I was wondering if some of the anomalies or some of the statistics in mathematics that shows the universe as we know it could not have been created by chance.
Oh, that you could teach. Something dropped out just a little bit there, Michael, but you're asking Stacy about teaching about the science and the statistics having to do with like the impossibility of all of this being as it is just by chance?
Exactly.
Okay, Dr. Stacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Relating to evolution, I think, is where it gets asked the most often. But really, anything, you have to define your terms and what you're talking about with chance. I mean, it is, if I said, what are the chances that I'm on the show today, right now? The chances of me sitting here right now are contingent on a lot of events that happened before leading up to this. Like I wrote a book, so I heard about the book. I got to know the people at Catholic Answers. So you could say that a few months ago, the chances of me being asked to be on the show are pretty great. But it was contingent on a lot of other things happening leading up to that. And there's a lot of situations in evolution where that's the same kind of thing happening. And if you don't just look at one thing and what are the chances of that one thing happening, but you look at the whole picture, what are the chances of all the diversity of life evolving to be what it is today? It certainly seems like there's a guiding hand in the whole thing. Like, I don't like to just take one single thing and say that right there, that bacteria flagellum or that dandelion is evidence of God. I think when you look at the totality of it, I mean, when you look at the totality of the periodic table even, the chances of all this happening since the beginning of time, even since the Planck era and all of that stuff that happened in the Big Bang and the evolution of the universe and the creation of our solar system and the emergent, the formation of planet Earth and then the emergence of life on this planet, all the way up to me and Cy being on Catholic Answers Live right now. I mean, it's all being guided. There is divine providence at work. And, I'm talking to a lot of scholars right now on a proposal to rewrite scientific curricula for physics, biology, and chemistry in a teleological fashion, in a way where we just all admit there's purpose and design everywhere, and just start talking about science that way, because it makes a lot more sense.
That's a wonderful idea. What do you think, Michael?
I like the conclusion, because one way to teach is to try to spike or spark or enhance the curiosity of your students. So if you could say, for instance, can anybody show me in mathematics some evidences of design and creation, and then get the kids to look for their own facts? That's better than me presenting facts and saying these are evidence of creation. I mean, that's what I think. What does the doctor think?
I think that's a great way to get kids thinking about it. Like, what, I mean, but you can say that about anything. You can say that about your heart. Like, what is the chance that your heart's going to beat one more time? So a whole lot of things have to happen just for that. I mean, but I agree with you totally. I'm just trying to give you like even more. Nothing inspires high school kids to learn and love their subject more than the teacher having passion about it, which I'm sure you do, and being told that it all fits together and it all makes sense. So many kids get out of high school, and they don't like math, they don't like chemistry, because they just don't see why they need to know that.
Right.
And when you tell them you need to know that because chemistry is happening in your body right now, it's how you're staying alive, and God's the creator of all of that. They can look at anything in science, and they can apply statistics. They can think about chance and randomness. They can be in awe and be amazed at anything you find to talk about in science. Whether you're talking about sugar molecules, or you're talking about photosynthesis, or you're talking about projectile motion. I've seen it happen. It inspires an awe and wonder in all of them if you just tell them that science is the study of God's creation.
It's interesting that Michael is asking the question about teaching about God using science, but you get around to saying you're actually you do a better job of teaching science too if you teach about God. That both these things are complementary.
Yeah, because if you tell a kid you have to learn chemistry just so you can get an A and graduate and go to college, they'll hate chemistry.
Right. Yeah. But if they're studying, as you like to say, and I have heard you say this a few times, if you're studying the handiwork of God, then all of a sudden there's a great purpose to this, and you're decoding something that that is created and has meaning, then science itself is more meaningful to the student then.
You're studying the mind of God. You're seeing how God put things together. And if you go on, and this has worked many times. I have ex-students who contact me who went on to become scientists. If you go on to study and you become a PhD scientist, if you become a PhD anything, you have to contribute new knowledge to your field. And so if you earn a PhD in chemistry or biology or some scientific field, you literally understand more about God than anybody else ever has. And that's pretty dang exciting, to think that you're going to get a PhD because you're going to learn something about science that nobody's ever learned before. You're going to contribute new knowledge. That means you're understanding God's handiwork better. And, I've had young women say, what if I want to get married and have a family? Should I go ahead? I don't know how to make that stop. What if I want to get married and have a family but I also want to get a PhD? Am I throwing away my education? And I tell them, you're not throwing away your education because of what I just said. You did something. I did that. I worked for DuPont for 5 years, and then I left when I read the catechism. It said children are not highly complex composite systems of atoms and molecules. They're gifts. Gifts. When I read that, I quit my job at DuPont. I stayed home for 15 years with my children, and now I'm back at work for a bishop. So, you never just go all in for God. Just learn all you can about God in life, and you'll be okay.
Michael, thank you so much, and God bless you in your teaching efforts.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the call. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, scientist and theologian, is our guest. She's the author of Particles of Faith, and Particles of Faith, the student edition. And if you've got a student, check it out. Let's go now to South Carolina, Charles in South Carolina, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Charles, go ahead with your question or comment for Dr. Trasancos.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I was intrigued because you were mentioning evolution, and I recall talking with a colleague of mine a few years ago that proudly was claiming, I used to be a Catholic, but I'm not anymore. And so we started in a course of conversation talking about different things with faith and science and this and that. The topic of evolution came up, and he quickly challenged me to say, wait a minute, Charles, are you an old Earth or a new Earth guy? And I looked at him with a deer in headlights look, and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, if you're old Earth, how many billions of years is the Earth, and what could have happened? If you're a new Earth guy, then you're literally looking at kind of what the church would teach. And I said, well, I'm not sure it's that black and white. But I've always been confused by that, and so now I've got a real live PhD scientist here to give me an opinion, and I'd love to hear what it is, ma'am. Thank you.
So wait, I just saw. I'm clear. Are you clear on the question, Stacy? I don't think I knew quite. Is it about whether the Earth is old or young?
Sorry. It was my understanding that there's two competing theories. Is the Earth really old, or is the Earth relatively young?
Gotcha.
And how would that factor into the evolutionary process and how the church explains this?
Okay, Charles. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is a great question, Charles, and you did put your finger on the crux of the question. I mean, first of all, the church does not say that we have to believe or accept or think it's true a young Earth. That's not Catholic teaching. Catholic teaching says the truth cannot contradict the truth, and we should seek the truth in science. I've looked at the scientific evidence that is put forth to claim the Earth is very young, and if those ideas are true, then everything we know about the atom is not true. And if we don't know what we think we know about the atom, your mobile phone wouldn't work. So, I mean, I think the better answer is that we do understand the atom pretty well. We still don't understand a lot. And that based on our dating methods, which are based on what atoms do in radioactive decay, there is no way that you can say the Earth is young. So the Earth is almost certainly older than what young Earth creationists think it is. Next, the Earth is as old as it is. I mean, things happened before we came along that happened regardless of what we think about it. Our job as humble scientists and humble Catholics is to dig around and try to figure out what happened.
Stacey, I gotta ask you to hang on. Can we finish it on the other side? Okay, thank you very much. Charles, I hope you can hang on because the music means I got to take a quick break. We'll be right back to finish with Dr. Stacey's answer about whether the earth is old or young, right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
When God looks at you, what does He see?
Reflect on that question, then call us tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
On most of these EWTN stations.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live with possibly the best Wednesday show we've ever done. Second hour, priest and PhD in neuroscience, Father Tad Boholchik will be with us, and we'll just do bioethics questions. If you've got a question about life at its earliest stages, latest stages, or anywhere in between, and about what the proper treatment of human life is, you are welcome to call. Second hour. This hour, just a general conversation about faith and science, which is always fun to do with Dr. Stacey Trasenko, scientist and theologian, who is also the executive director of the St. Philip Institute of Catechesis and Evangelization in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas, the author of Particles of Faith. When we had to go to the break, we had Charles on the line asking about, as a Catholic, what must one believe? Is the earth old, about 14 billion years old almost, or is it a young earth? And you were in the midst of your answer, Dr. Trasenkos.
Yes. It's old. It's older for sure than young earth creationists would say. And I was talking about atoms, but I mean, to get to a bigger, so I hope I answered your question, but I just want to say something that's beyond that. If we approach evolution like we're studying God's handiwork, we don't have to get too upset about any of those theories, young earth, old earth. We simply just say, you know, my faith is not dependent on which scientific theory I accept. We say that we are Catholics and we thirst for the truth, and we want to know the truth, because it doesn't do our faith any good to believe something in science that's not true, to look for things that aren't true. So you really, I mean, that was kind of where the faith and science myth started. We don't need to worry about which scientific theory is going to make our faith make sense. Doesn't matter. If you're studying God's handiwork, scientific theories are just explanations about what we find in nature as we try to put it all together and understand creation. So it liberates you as a Catholic to say, a Christian, we're all united as Christians on this. It liberates you to be able to look at what science is discovering, look at what scientists, mere humans, are theorizing, and just say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let me see the data. Let me hear your theory. Let me understand. And you may get to the last day of your life, and I guarantee you'll get to the last day of your life, and you still won't know everything. You still won't know exactly how old the Earth is. So enjoy science, dive into it, learn all that you can, and refuse to have a conversation where your faith is somehow dependent on which theory you accept. Say, I accept any theory that makes good sense.
So, Charles, it sounds like the Adams insist that the universe is old. What do you think?
I can live with that. I like it a lot.
Okay.
So I will not be confused by a different argument. Thanks. I appreciate the answer. Thank
you very, very much. But I got to say, though, you're an apologist for science as much, not as much, but in addition to being an apologist for religion. But I have a complaint about you scientists, and I want you to address this. Often I will hear, like, we did this experiment, and it proves that there's no such thing as free will, or we did this experiment and it proves that. And I often think, okay, it's either the scientists or it's science journalists who are doing it. I'm not sure. But a lot of times the spiritual or the debunking claims of science are exaggerated. Nobody has proved that there's no free will, and they should stop saying it.
Exactly. It's sloppy thinking. I mean, if you have no free will, and I mean, it's funny that atheists used to call themselves free thinkers, because you can't really think freely if you have no will to decide what you're going to think. So like y'all are not even making sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you don't, but they are forced into scientists who, and I used to be one. I can speak here with some experience. If you're a scientist who doesn't accept the existence of anything spiritual, like to you, everything is atoms and molecules and matter and energy, and everything has a physical explanation, you are compelled by your own blinders to say there's no free will. Because the only reason your brain is thinking the thoughts it's thinking is because of the atoms and molecules doing their thing. And you can even get deterministic about it and say they're doing what they're supposed to do right now, and it's just a series of events since the beginning of time. Like if Cy got up to go get a taco right now, we would say he was born to do that. And so it's a very strict deterministic view of things, because they won't take the blinders off and accept there's a fuller reality. And I lived that way for a decade of my adult life, and it wrecks your relationships. Because if you think the human person is just atoms and molecules and has no free will, it makes you a terrible mother and wife and friend and sister, because you're a control freak. So that's where it comes from. And I think it's enough to just refute it by saying, well, if you think there's only atoms and molecules, that doesn't even make sense. You're not thinking freely. You're going to stand right where you are and scratch your head the rest of your life. I accept there's a fuller reality that God created. There's spiritual realm, angels, the human is body and soul, God exists, there's an eternity in heaven. I believe in all that, and I'm going to get on with things and figure out how to practice virtue and be good and get myself to heaven. That's a much better way to live.
All right, you're redeeming scientists for me a little bit, there's nothing forcing me to get a taco. I just eat tacos because I want to eat tacos.
That's right.
And I definitely want to eat tacos. Robert in Cincinnati, Ohio, you are next. Robert is listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Thanks for waiting, Robert. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Okay, thank you. I have been thinking about the end of Christianity at the end of the book of Revelation, It helps us know how to live in the present, even. And at the end of the book of Revelation, all people are immortal. They have resurrected bodies, as Jesus does. And in Jesus' resurrected body, he could eat. So I was wondering, would people be raising plants and animals in order to eat them in the final state of things? And does that mean that the plants and animals will still die and reproduce even though people can't?
I hope so. I don't know what the answer is. I just hope so. Go ahead.
We'll have to find out. But I wrote an article for Catholic Answers in the online magazine a while ago. It was called "What's Christ's Resurrected Body Made Of?" And because as a chemist, I want to know, what do our atoms and molecules do in our glorified body? If we are lucky enough to have a glorified body one day, what do the atoms and molecules do? And St. Thomas Aquinas he deals with everything in the Summa and his other writings, but he did deal with that. And he said that since our bodies are bodies and bodies naturally are made of atoms, that our resurrected bodies would probably be made of atoms as well. But in the resurrected sense, our will be completely conformed to God's will, and so our body, our atoms, our glorified body will conform itself to our will, which is conformed to God's will. And so I don't know what that means exactly about how things reproduce and get on with life. I don't know what it means about what we look like. Do we just think what we want to look like and that's what we look like? I don't know. But Aquinas did take that up, and he did say that he didn't say atoms because they didn't talk about atoms back then, but he said if our natural bodies are made of elements, then a real glorified body would also be made of elements. It's just that they're not obeying the corrupted laws of nature here. They're obeying the law of God.
I hope that helped, Robert. I am looking forward to my body being subject to my will, which it just isn't right now. It just refuses. It's criminally disobedient.
Wouldn't that be great, though?
Yeah, it's going to be very helpful. I'm going to go down a couple of sizes. Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian, is our guest. You're welcome to call. We're talking about faith and science this hour. 888-318-7884. Dr. Trasenko's one of the finest speakers we have had at a Catholic Answers conference, put up slides about photosynthesis that I still have nightmares about. But did you enjoy the conference when you came, Dr. Stacy?
It was the best time. It was a great conference. I totally loved it, and I'm having fun telling people here about it in Texas because a couple of us are coming up.
You're going to come see us with Bishop Strickland. This September's conference. I'm saying all this to try to get you to, help us advertise because we really want people to come to the conference. So
it is the time of your life as a Catholic because you will be there with. Not only is it's the time of your life, no, but it's well organized. It's in a beautiful place in a beautiful part of the country, and y'all put on a conference like a machine. I mean, everything is organized. Everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. I know there's a tremendous amount of work that goes on getting ready for a conference. You spend over a year planning. I know. But so people can just come there. And I mean, I think I said it before. Yeah, I did. It's like being in heaven for a little while because you're surrounded. I mean, you're with the communion of the faithful. And you're learning about your faith, and it's exciting. And everywhere you turn, there are people who are on fire about their faith. And you just go back thinking, it's good to know that exists. It's a great time.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I really appreciate you saying that. And now I feel like we don't even need Chris Check. President Chris Check is here to invite people to come to the conference. But can you beat that?
Well, Si, I always say to people, it's a glimpse of life on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
Stacy was a little more direct, but I think that's because she's a chemist.
Yeah, well, she thinks in that.
Stacy, God bless your boss, Bishop Strickland. He's such a fine man, such a courageous prelate. And I shot him a note over the weekend, and I said, Your Excellency, please mention on your tweet about on your Twitter feed about the Catholic Answers Conference, and he did it immediately within 30 minutes. He sent one out, but he's so humble too. He didn't even mention he's the keynote speaker. So I said,
he wouldn't.
no. So I said, okay, this is how you have to write it. You have to say, join me. I'm the keynote speaker at Catholic Answers Conference. So, but we're thrilled to have him, and we're glad that you're going to be coming with him. A central topic to our faith, Jesus Christ, and I know His Excellency is going to be talking about the Eucharist, but Paul Gondreau is going to be there, my brother, Sister Mari Stella, Cy. When I see all that we put together for this conference and what we charge for it, and it's a bargain, I don't know. I mean, I just got an invitation for a gala, a very worthy organization here in town that's a one-night event. That's equal to what the cost of our conference is, which is a 3-day event.
Yeah,
and
you get dinner.
And it includes a dinner with Bishop Strickland. I mean, if there's a better deal out there in Catholic conferences, I don't know what it is. And I don't think there's a better deal on such a fine hotel right now. I don't know if folks have looked at hotel rates since inflation arrived. But this is an amazing $160 a night in a beautiful hotel, completely refitted. So join us, folks, because we have an early bird. And it's going to expire.
On July 16th, which is coming right up, the early bird expires. It's $30 off an already really inexpensive ticket. It really is. You should check it out at CatholicAnswersConference.com, CatholicAnswersConference.com. The conference is September 23rd through 26th, about the most beautiful time of the year in about the most beautiful place in the world. 23rd through 26th at the Hyatt Regency La Jolla, right here in beautiful sunny San Diego. All those people Chris mentioned, plus square dancing, plus we're going to do the live radio show a couple times, CatholicAnswersConference.com.
And the best MC in the history of MCs, Cy Keller.
I was going to say, I thought you'd replace me when you started that sentence, but okay. Check it out. Well, yeah, we really would love you to come. And there's still quite a few spaces open because we didn't know until, because it's the state of California. We didn't know until late whether we'd be able to do it. But we can. And there's still about, 500
Come and celebrate with
spots.
us, folks.
CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
I'm Roy Brown, Executive Director for Billings Catholic Radio. Catholic radio is arguably the greatest tool for evangelization. Radio has the power to speak directly to individuals and creates a sense of one-on-one fellowship. There is no better way to evangelize than through a relationship where we can share and bring the love and joy of Christ to another's daily life.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're talking about faith and science with just about the most qualified person, scientist and theologian. That's what you want, a scientist and a theologian. We're going to talk about those things. Dr. Stacy Trasancos. And up next, we go to Cincinnati. Dave in Cincinnati, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. You are up next, Dave. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
All right. Thanks for taking my call. Dr. Stacy, thanks so much for the work you're doing. It's really cool. I'm a physician, and I just want to affirm that what you describe as far as science leading you to God is certainly been true in my life. It is studying the human body has been awe-inspiring, to say the least. So that's the first thing I want to say. But then I have a question for you. I realize that the Catholic Church doesn't have a specific position on evolution or intelligent design, etc. But when you're posed with that question yourself, how do you respond to, how did all these things come into being, so to speak? Is there a way that you phrase that? Because it certainly does come up. And as part of your answer, I don't know if you've had any, are you familiar with Dr. Ken Miller, the professor of biology at Brown University, and his work? So he was actually one of my professors in school.
Wow.
I particularly, so I'm wondering what you think of his work.
Stacey?
I like his work. Yeah, I've talked to him several times. It's been a few years, but I'm a fan of his. I like his work. I like what he's done. I think he's been misunderstood and misquoted a lot in the past, unfortunately. But, to me, it's just an opportunity for awe and wonder. And I know I keep saying that, but it's amazing to me. I'm serious. I'm as a physician, you know this better than I do. I'm thinking of it as a chemist. When I literally think about what has to happen every second for our bodies just to function and be alive, for our hearts to keep beating. I read somewhere your heart beats like 100,000 times a day. And it's almost scary when you think of all the things electrically and in the cells that have to happen to cause your heart to do that and keep pumping blood through your body. But then when you think about the whole span of life on this planet, how the first living things came to be, how the atoms and molecules came together and became more ordered and functioned together and gave rise to the first living thing, and then how that living thing reproduced and became everything you see today. It's amazing. It is just, I just think it's better just to look at it. One thing I teach in the book, so in my book, Particles of Faith, the longest chapter is on evolution because that is the biggest question. But you really can just step back away from it all the same way that we bless our meals and say, thank you, God, for this, thank you for your bounty. When you're about to eat, we should look at the whole world and just say, thank you, God, for that. And when we learn about science, it's even more awe and wonder. And so I always just approach evolution like that. Like, it's really weird to think about how if you go back generations enough, you might get to something that's not human. But that certainly seems to be what genetics and the fossil record and taxonomy and anatomy and physiology, it certainly seems to be the story that fits together, that there's just this stream of evolving life, diversifying, and in response to the natural environments and genetic mutations and whatever else contributed to it that we don't know about. It's an awesome story. And there's the last part of the question about Adam and Eve. And I think if you come at it with that awe and wonder perspective, was there an Adam and Eve? I'm not ready to say there wasn't. I don't see any reason why we can't say that, yeah, God created Adam and Eve somewhere along the way, and they were the first humans, and it could have absolutely been a miraculous creation that didn't fit with the rest of the evolutionary order. And God absolutely could have done that. And I'm not ready to say that didn't happen because you can't prove it did not happen. And that's kind of how I explained it to my kids, because they always ask, what you taught me in first grade religion class, is that the same as what you're teaching me in junior high biology? I'm like, yes, it is. They don't cancel each other out.
Okay, so Dave, does that address what you wanted to address?
Yeah, it's probably as well as we can get to it. I imagine that really we're just not going to know all the details until we get to heaven, God willing. So
Right. Yeah, you're going to die not knowing everything. I heard that from a scientist and theologian. I don't like it, but that's what's going to happen. I'm going to die not knowing everything. The part about intelligent design, if I may, intelligent design is so controversial. There's a certain way that intelligent design is obvious, that God is intelligent and he designed the whole thing. Like that's entirely uncontroversial unless you just don't believe in God. But are there types of intelligent design theories that are more extensive than that and are problematic?
I say they are, and you know, I've had discussions with Michael Behe at length before. There's interviews where we're together. Fundamentally, we ended up agreeing. What I did not agree, what I don't agree with, is any kind of approach to nature where we treat it like God was just walking around one day and he tripped over this thing called nature and he decided to tinker with it and order some things, and we discover those really ordered things and say, oh, look, that must be evidence of God. I don't like that view. And I don't think that's what intelligent design theorists mean to convey, but it's what they do convey, because I've heard many people be confused about that. Like, this here in nature is evidence of design. This is evidence of design. I don't think you should look at any one thing. I think you should look at everything. I mean, for crying out loud, look at the periodic table, the whole periodic table with no missing spots in the number of protons for all the naturally created elements that we know of that make up everything chemically. That is all evidence. I mean, it's all evidence of intelligent design. So I said in the book, intelligent design is an all or none proposition. You got to believe it's all intelligently designed or none of it. And once you say it's all intelligently designed, then you really don't need intelligent design theory. You just need people who say science is the study of the handiwork of God.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate it. I want to get to Michael in Cleveland listening on The Rock. Michael, go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy. And you're going to have to be kind of quick because we're right up at the end here.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be really quick. So thank you for taking the call. And so basically, I'm kind of referring to that teacher who called earlier. And I just think that it's the culture war right now that's going on. It's like with these TV shows like The Big Bang Theory. And then there's that little show they're gearing towards kids. It's about the young Big Bang Theory guy who's really smart, but of course he doesn't. He's an atheist, I believe, and he so he doesn't believe in that. And as a little kid, they kind of get that across in their show. So I think it's important, even in a seventh grade science class, even though you're not teaching that topic, and you're at a Catholic school, bring it up and state something like in Father Spitzer's Universe when he says, I've heard him say stuff like, let's say the Earth was out of orbit by, a very small amount. I don't know whether it's inches or so, and nothing would work. Everything would be messed up. So I think it's important for a teacher like that to point something like that out, even if the general topic of the class, when you're getting across the point of what you're doing with all these other things. So that's all. That's my only comment. And you can comment
you left
on that.
Stacy with a minute, but thank you, Michael. Thanks very much. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, fine tuning is everywhere. There are some amazing fine tuning facts. I mean, when I teach chemistry, the electron is 1,876 times smaller than the proton. But if the electron were 2.5 times bigger than that, it would be so big that it would collapse into the nucleus, and there would literally be an empty universe. There would be no atoms that ever would have formed. So, I mean, it's very precisely fine-tuned, the sizes of things, the energy of things, the charge on things. You can pick anything and talk about how finely tuned it is. Photosynthesis, amazing, blows your mind.
Yeah, the fact that plants keep giving us stuff to breathe and eat, and we didn't do anything to deserve it. That's pretty impressive. Thanks very much, Michael. I appreciate that. Dr. Stacy Trasancos has been our guest. You can get her book, Particles of Faith, pretty much anywhere. I'm sure that we have it on our website, shop.catholic.com, but there's a student edition as well. So if you have a student who you'd like to be well-versed in both faith and science, and who also appreciates the reasons for being well-versed in both faith and science, let me recommend Particles of Faith, the student edition. Also, Dr. Stacy's coming to our conference, so you should come too, and come say hello to her. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Cy. Say hi to Father Tad for me.
I will. I know you're friends, and we should really do this more often. I feel like the COVID threw everybody's schedules off, and I'm very happy to see you again.
It's good to see you too. God bless.
Coming up, Dr. Tad Pacholczyk. Excuse me. Well, he is Dr. Tad Pacholczyk, but I got to call him Father Tad Pacholczyk, and he's from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. We're going to talk about bioethics. Bring your bioethics questions right after this. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I told you it was going to be one of the best Wednesday shows we've ever done, and I'd say halfway through, I'm being pretty much proved a prophet in that regard, and I expect no dip in quality this hour. Father Tad Pacholczyk is our guest. So many Catholics know Father Tad. Not all of them can pronounce his last name, but I can, Pacholczyk. But he is priest of the Diocese of Fall River, a neuroscientist and an ethicist, and the director of education for the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and the perfect guy to talk to if you have bioethics questions. If you have those questions, if you have a question about a situation in your own family, if you have a question, a theoretical question about how we do bioethics, you want to know about how to treat life at its beginnings, at its ends, when folks are disabled, when we're sick, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And Father Tad Pacholczyk, thank you so much for being with us again.
Well, Cy, great to be able to join you, and I'm impressed you got the name perfect. You sound like you're from Poland, perhaps.
I have a Polish grandmother. Well, I had a Polish grandmother, so, but I...
no kidding. Well, you have a leg up then.
Yes, I do. I feel like if you have any Polish in you, you have a leg up on everyone in the whole world. I don't know if that's immoral to say that or unethical, but I feel like even a little bit of Polish, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good start. Again, our number Oh, go ahead, Father.
Well, I was just going to say, and it's always great to be closely related to Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II.
Exactly. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. If you have a question on bioethics, you have a question, maybe you have a question about suicide or euthanasia, something about abortion, something about in vitro fertilization, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. And that's actually where I'm going to start, Father, because I like to revisit this with you, and I know I have asked you about it before, but I like to revisit with you every now and then because I believe that among all the bioethics questions and problems, the one that Catholics are most confused by and conflicted about is in vitro fertilization because it makes babies, and aren't we supposed to be happy about making babies? And I think we are happy about making babies, but could you give us a little primer just to start about why the Church teaches us to stay away from in vitro fertilization?
Yes, I mean, I think you're right. This is a topic that's hard for people to wrap their minds around, precisely because it does seem like the Church has always articulated a strongly pro-life position. And you say, well, here's a technology that seems like it's pro-life. It's making new life, bringing new life into the world. Gee, how come the Church says that that's not okay? And I sometimes will remind people that in vitro fertilization is not actually pro-life at its core. It's more like a double-edged sword, and there is a death-dealing edge to that sword when you realize, for example, that as you do in vitro fertilization, you often create supernumerary or extra embryos. Those embryos can be frozen, they can be experimented on, they can be destroyed, etc. And, you know, there are other steps along the way of doing in vitro. For example, many times these clinics that do it, they will compete with each other trying to get the most customers because this has become a multi-billion-dollar business. And one of the ways you do that is you want to report high success rates on the internet at your website. So how do you do that? Well, you don't implant just one embryo. You implant maybe 3, maybe 4. And then you might get twins or even triplets or in some cases quads. And then they have to kind of circle back to you and say, well, you know, this is going to be a difficult pregnancy. How about if we do a selective reduction and go in and end the life of one or more of the growing children in utero? So again, you see the kind of death-dealing edge of the sword. Also, when you do this technology, the way you typically do it is you produce a large number of embryos in the lab, and then you inspect them. You grade them under the microscope. You pick out the best-looking ones, and the ones that don't look quite so good, quite so perfect, those ones will get shuttled to the side. Maybe they'll be put into the deep freeze and frozen, or some of them may simply be discarded and poured down the sink. So, I'm mentioning some of these cases of what we call the collateral damage from in vitro fertilization, because the collateral damage is very, very high. But the real issue here runs even deeper than just collateral damage, in the sense that here we have to kind of hit the pause button and say, how is it that each of us is meant to come into the world? And we're meant to come into the world in the loving embrace of our mom and our dad, not under the bright lights of the laboratory, not where we can be manipulated and, mistreated by laboratory personnel. We're meant to be loved into existence, the fruit of the love of our mom and dad, and only in that setting of marital intimacy. So that's really the Church's core teaching, that we are entitled, as a way of safeguarding our human dignity, to enter the world only that way, never to come into the world in glassware. That is always dehumanizing, demeaning, and improper. And perhaps the other piece here that's always worth mentioning is that, people who come into the world this way, they are deserving of full respect from all of us. They're not at any fault. Sometimes people say, the Church doesn't like in vitro babies, but that's not true. They'll say, I heard of a priest who didn't want to baptize a baby that was born this way. Well, that's not the case at all. Priests will baptize these children as long as the parents, are willing to raise them as Catholics, which is a requirement for any baptism. So, there are all kinds of myths like that suggesting that somehow the child is at fault, but the child is innocent, completely innocent in this setting. And the problem is not with the child, but really with the decision made by his or her parents. That's the root problem in vitro fertilization, and the way that they miss.
Nope, little glitch in the phone.
Together.
Thank you, Father. Our number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Already lots of folks on the line. Let me see one line open now if you have a bioethics question that you've been wanting to ask. By the way, you do not have to be Catholic to call. You don't have to be Christian to call. You want a bioethics answer, we're happy to have you talk with Father Tad Pacholczyk, who is himself an ethicist and a scientist. 888-318-7884. We'll start with Mary in Ohio, watching on YouTube. Mary, thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Thank you. I was just wondering what the Catholic view is on a gender reassignment surgery.
Yes. So the issue here is that when you actually look at what is being proposed to be done here, gender reassignment. So you have somebody. This is very important to be clear that we are not talking about ambiguous genitalia. We are not talking about a situation where there's some uncertainty about whether this is a male or a female. Rather, we have, for example, a person who grew up male is now maybe in their 40s and makes a decision one day and says, I would like to become female. Is it all right for that person to go and request gender reassignment surgery? Or another way to ask the question would be, could Catholic hospitals participate in this kind of surgical intervention? And the short answer would be that this involves an act of damaging the human body, or we will sometimes say mutilating the body, in a fashion that is not in accord with its given design. In other words, that when we're born as a man or born as a woman, that is a huge and beautiful gift that we are entrusted with to protect and safeguard, and not to take interventions that will then cause harm to the body. So one of the effects, if one goes through this, for example, involves the use of hormones, and these hormones themselves are strong. They're cross-sex hormones, and they can impede fertility. And certainly if you go the next step to the surgery itself, this will cause sterility in many cases, a direct sterilization of the person. And that is something that is also morally unacceptable, to make a decision to damage a perfectly working system of the human body. So the short answer really would be that this is not something morally acceptable for individuals to do when they, simply make a decision one day that they would like to reassign their gender. And of course, you cannot actually change from male to female or the other direction. Every single cell in our body is coded with either male or female genes, and that can't be changed even by going in and surgically changing one's physical appearance. So it's important here instead to recognize that when individuals are facing gender confusion or gender dysphoria, that they need to seek good supportive help and counseling so that they can work out, what's really going on. Why are they facing this very difficult situation and confusion? And sometimes good psychotherapy can be very, very beneficial for these individuals. So I hope that's helpful, Mary.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a bit confused with that because, how is it any different, mutilating your body when you get an organ transplant for an organ that that's no longer working? You're still taking out a part of your body that was created.
Right, but you're taking out, for example, a kidney that failed. So that's not mutilation. That's recognition that that's a dead organ. But in this case, you've got perfectly functioning genitalia, and you step in and say, hey, I don't want these working anymore. I'm going to destroy these working organs. So that's the distinction. It's a really important distinction. And in medicine, we're always seeking to support the proper operations of the organ systems within our bodies, never to go in and directly cause harm to those systems to the extent that that can be avoided. I mean, I'll give you another example, which I think you'll see clearly how it's different. If a man has testicular cancer and you go in and remove the testicles, well, you could say that's a mutilation, but it's not in the sense that we're describing it. That is a therapeutic removal of the cancer, recognizing that there's no other way to do it except to remove the testicles that have become infected with cancer. So that is not a mutilation in the sense that we're describing it here, where you make a decision to remove a healthy organ. You're doing it only as a recognition of the principle of totality, that in order to save the life of this man who has testicular cancer, that you do need to sacrifice a part here for the good of the whole. And that is perfectly allowable, perfectly consonant with sound medical ethics principles.
Does that make sense to you, Mary?
Yep.
Okay. God bless you. Thanks very much. Appreciate the call. We have to take a quick break, and the lines are full, so we've got lots of bioethics questions to come for our guest, Father Tad Pacholczyk, right after this.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
You get paid in heaven for the ministry that you do on here. I love your show. My life has completely changed. Through God's power and through His revelation, I've changed myself in my life. All my first fruits go to God, and I remain in God. I pray all the time. Your show is in my prayer.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Thank you so much for being with us. We really do appreciate that you take the time. It means a lot to us. And we're very grateful to our guest, Father Tad Pacholczyk, the Director of Education at the National Catholic Bioethics Center. He comes on periodically to talk bioethics with us, and it's one of those fields that there's always something new. There's always some innovation we've got to talk about, but also it's just a field where there are all kinds of ethical considerations. And so you're welcome to call with your questions about life in its earliest, latest, or middle stages, any condition, what the proper treatment of human life. You are welcome to call 888-318-7884. We'll go now to Los Angeles, right here in California, listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio, Channel 130. Ava in Los Angeles. You there with us, Ava?
Yep.
Hi, Ava. Go ahead with your question for Father.
So my question is being gay or lesbian a sin?
Okay, excellent question. And, that question really, I think, brings up the need to make certain distinctions. In other words, the distinctions between people and the types of acts that they may choose to engage in. We could say, for example, that you might have somebody who is heterosexual and very sexually strong appetites. And so what does he do? He's married, but he chooses adultery. Now, when we meet a person like that, we wouldn't want to reduce him and say, oh, he's just an adulterer, in the sense of we're going to define him exclusively by his adultery. That wouldn't be fair. Now, it would be all right to say he has chosen a sin, and this is regrettable, and we must pray that he steps away from his active decision to cheat on his wife. And I think we can all understand that, but we're not saying the only way to understand him is to declare him always and everywhere an adulterer. That would not be fair. That would not be right. So we have to be careful when we get into the gay lesbian arena of doing exactly that same move, where we say, I'm going to define a person by their sexual preferences or proclivities. I'm going to actually define them and give a whole category to them and a lifestyle. And instead, we need to be able to say, look, what are the types of activities that are not ordered and not good for a person? And that would include any type of same-sex sexual activity that will be harmful to us always and invariably, in the same way that adultery will always and everywhere be harmful to us and should never be chosen. But, it may be the case, much as we said for the man who commits adultery, that he has strong sexual appetites, and needs to bring them into order. And similarly, it's possible to have strong same-sex attractions, which we are called to bring into the order of God's will. And part of that order does include the call to chastity. So if you have an individual who, as you're asking, they say they're gay, what does that mean? Well, if we understand that that means they have a strong same-sex attraction, that by itself is not a sin. But if they make a decision to go out and engage in the action, then we're talking about a different level. So the church always distinguishes between the sin and the individual who might commit that sin. And we don't want to define people by the sins that they might commit in any sense here, but to just say our sexuality is a gift from God with a certain order to it that we are called to respect, and that means no same-sex activity, and that we don't then fall into that trap, really, of labeling people in that way. So it's not a sin to have same-sex attractions. That's the short answer to your question.
Does that help you, Ava? Is that clear enough?
I have a question. What if you're young and you already know that, you're not attracted to the opposite gender of yourself?
Well, I think, that's a fair question, and I think there are people who discover that. And that's something that is going to require God's grace and the support of some good friends and family to help you to work through that. I think that it varies in the sense that some people it may be something very, very strongly ingrained, and right from the get-go, they have something that made it clear to them that they are not attracted to people of the opposite sex. And that will be something that will be part of what they work with throughout their lives. And, God's grace is real in this, in the sense that God invites individuals like that to choose to live a life of chastity, a life that does not involve acting on the impulse to engage in same-sex sexual relations. And that's a challenge, but a beautiful invitation. And I think when one realizes that not everybody is called to lives that involve sexual activity, and certainly those who are called to consecrated life, celibate lifestyles, remind the rest of the Christian community of that deep truth. And, sometimes even in marriage, there will be situations where people have to choose not to engage in sex. So I think that that's at the core of what will be the call from the Lord for those individuals who do discover very, very strong same-sex attractions. Now, I think there are some cases where individuals are not strongly in that direction, but they're maybe not sure, and they're kind of experimenting in their mind, thinking about these things, not sure. And sometimes there are also issues that may have happened earlier in their lives that leave them uncomfortable about their own sexuality, that, again, some good psychotherapy could assist them, could help them resolving whatever it was.
Ava,
So I hope that's helpful.
I hope it's helpful too. There's just so many other people on the line. We've got to go. I feel like we could talk to you all day. Ava, thank you so much for your call. I want you to feel welcome to call back anytime. I hope you will, but I have to move on. Okay, Ava?
Okay, that helped.
Okay, good. God bless you. Let's go to Marty in Austin, Texas, listening on our own website here at Catholic Answers. Marty, go ahead with your question for our guest, Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Real quickly, what are some possible release dates for a COVID vaccine that is ethically sourced and is either used?
Marty, I'm not sure why we're having the phone trouble, but we are. So I'm just going to repeat your question and just ask you to say yes, because I think I got it. You're looking for a date. When will there be a COVID vaccine that's a fully ethical COVID vaccine? Is that your question, Marty?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry that I had to interrupt. Go ahead, Father.
Yeah. So, Marty, at this point, we don't have a clear date available for that. There are some candidates that are out there that look promising. For example, there is a company that in India developed a vaccine for COVID. I think the company is called Bharat Biotech, and they also go, I think, by the name of Ocugen. And I think they are looking into getting FDA emergency use authorization, but I'm not sure how far along they are on that. So the short answer to your question is we don't have any current candidates that do not have any association with cell lines derived from abortions. So that particular ethical concern around the COVID-19 vaccines remains in play. And I hope that maybe 6 months or a year from now, there will be some candidates that will be available to the public. But currently, there aren't any, and I don't know that there is any date at which they're likely to become available.
Marty, thanks. I hope that was helpful to you. I'm going to keep moving because, as I said, there are lots and lots of folks on the line for our guest, Father Tad Pacholczyk from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Let us see who's up next. Alice, I believe, in Illinois, listening on 89.5. You are next, Alice. Go ahead with your question for Father Tad.
Thank you, Father Tad. I think this is so timely. Just today, I work for a general surgeon, and we had people come in with wound care products. And during I was listening to the discussion, they mentioned that these products contain chorionic and amniotic material. And in the past, when I've asked where that comes from, they will simply say that they are donated. And so I just put the yield sign in my mind. Do we know anything about these wound care products that contain this type of tissue?
Alice, that's a great question. You're going to have to hold on for an answer, however. Where does that tissue come from? Especially, I'm sure, does it come from aborted babies? We'll find out from Father Tad right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Enter promo code EARLY to save $30. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
When God looks at you, what does he see?
Reflect on that question, then call us tomorrow on Take 2 with Jerry and Debbie.
On most of these EWTN stations.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Having a really good Wednesday. You know, it's not like, I don't want to complain about the other Wednesday shows, but they're not all of this quality. And Father Tad Pacholczyk is our guest this hour. Father Tad is a neuroscientist and priest from the Diocese of Fall River in Massachusetts who is now works at the National Catholic Bioethics Center. And you can always, if you have bioethics questions, maybe you are a medical professional or someone with a family member who's in a situation that you don't understand, you can contact them and they will help you find an answer to your situation. But we're lucky enough to every now and then we get Father Tad on and he answers bioethics questions. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884 if you've got one. On the line with us now is Alice in Illinois, who was talking about working for a surgeon, and some of these wound care products come in and they are kind of advertised or sold, Father, as having tissue from umbilical cords and the like. And Alice is suspicious that this might come from aborted babies. Do you know anything about that?
My understanding is that these products are derived from items like umbilical cords or afterbirth materials. And I have not heard of arguments being put forward that these are from aborted material. So, you know, it has not come to my attention that there are any significant moral concerns around this. Very often after a child is born, there will be, you know, a willingness on the part of the family to allow for those tissues to be used for potentially to help others through wound care and other types of, cell studies and so on. So these are used quite widely in the research arena, and my understanding is that when you have these companies that are also doing some harvesting of this type, that there is not any significant ethical issue at play.
Alice, does that put your mind a little bit at ease?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that, Father Ted. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
You're very welcome.
I feel like our radar is up. Anybody who's a pro-life person, because we've just seen so many creepy things done. People selling the body parts of aborted children and that kind of thing. It doesn't seem to be unreasonable that Alice's radar kind of detector went off. But as far as you know, these are okay.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, I agree, too, about the radar, that in this day and age, there is such a lack of respect for human life and its origins. And, in early prenatal situations, that it's just kind of natural for all of us to have some hesitation when we hear about products that we're not sure how they were prepared.
I don't know if you've been out here to San Diego, but we have a whole area which is bio research area. And I had to say, I feel a kind of sadness whenever I have to go by that area, related to the fact that, first of all, I'm not sure what's going on in there, but like the Craig Ventnor Institute is over there, and I'm pretty sure what they're doing is creating embryonic human beings and doing experiments on them. And it just feels so horrible to just go by those buildings. The things that people are doing today are really awful.
Well, I agree that there's another problem too, which is that we refer to the kind of ivory tower of the scientist, where a lot of times one doesn't know what's going on. There hasn't been maybe full disclosure. And that's a challenge, because on the one hand, a lot of scientific research is performed using your and my taxpayer dollars. And so, there's a sense that we want to be sure that the funds are not going in any troublesome directions. And there have been things like the Hyde Amendment, that have been trying to prevent taxpayer money from being used to pay for abortions. And even those types of restrictions look like they're, going to be a thing of the past. Yeah. And so, it is a very troubling time when human life is being basically instrumentalized in the hands of many scientists.
Yeah. Alice, again, thanks for the call and for generating that conversation. You might notice a little fluctuation in Father's phone. He's got an electrical storm coming through Massachusetts. So let me just tell you something about Father Tapaholchik. I know this, and I don't know if you know it. The devil doesn't like him, and so he tries to interrupt him, and so there's an electrical storm coming through. But I like you, Father, but I know the devil doesn't like you.
Well, thank you, Si. I appreciate your support.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll do you much good in your dealings with the devil, but I'm here for you, Father. Owen in Chicago is next, watching on YouTube. Owen, go ahead with your question for Father.
Hello. So my question is in regards to an answer from a previous question about not mutilating your body. So what is the Church's view on circumcision, especially circumcision of infants who can't really consent or understand what's going on?
Yes. So, Owen, it's a perfectly fair question. And I agree, it can seem like that this would be a type of mutilatory act, but it's not mutilatory when it's properly done, in the sense that we were describing it earlier, in the sense of taking away function. This is something that, depending on, it's kind of tricky to put it into a simple category. But some people have made arguments that this is, removal of something that's excess, that one could, make an argument that it is not a removal of something essential, doesn't affect function, And there also are arguments indicating that sometimes there can be actually health benefits that will accrue. So the church has never come out and said that circumcision would be an example of mutilation. Never said that. And, of course, we know our Lord himself was circumcised when he came to earth. So, I think the church has taken more of a kind of recognition that this is something that some parents may decide to do. And, there may be some religious and some cultural reasons that may be motivating that. But I'm not aware of any fundamental sorts of problems that would be raised, ethically speaking, by the practice, that has been with us for millennia. So, I think the important piece here is that one would generally say this doesn't involve or entail loss of function, like for the case, where we were talking about the transgender situation, where fertility would be lost in those surgeries.
Oh, and thank you. We'll come up to the break now. Father Tad Pacholczyk is our guest from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. If you have a bioethics question, anything having to do with the human body, with the human person, with the proper treatment of human life from its earliest stages until natural death, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. We'll take that break. Be right back with more Father Tad right after this.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
The Church has 2,000 years of wisdom to share on what it takes to live life gracefully.
And we're so overwhelmed by how much our faith has transformed our marriage and family especially. We want everyone to experience the incredible gift that the Catholic vision of life and love really is.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak. Tomorrow morning, 10 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. One of the greatest Wednesday shows we've ever done. 888-318-7884 is our number. Father Tad Pacholczyk is our guest for the rest of the hour. And if you've got a bioethics question, I strongly encourage you to call, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not, whether you're a believer or not. As a matter of fact, it turns out that the Catholic Church has a long, long tradition of ethical and moral reasoning, and much of it is easy for anybody to grasp. You don't have to have a supernatural faith. If you do, it helps. But you're welcome to call with your questions, 888-318-7884. Tom in Omaha's next. Omaha's in Nebraska. Tom's listening, of course. If you're in Nebraska, you're listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Hi, Tom.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Here's my question. For these people that are homosexuals or lesbians or whatever, seems to me they have a pretty heavy cross. And my question is this: is that indeed true? That's a cross? Is that a cross? And then connected to that is this: do they receive graces and greater holiness and so on if they embrace this cross?
Tom, excellent question. And really, your question is sort of raising the whole issue, up into a theological perspective. And it certainly is the case that each of us have different crosses. None of us are perfect. We all have different burdens and struggles. And so, yes, I think it's fair to say that those who face same-sex attractions, they have a particular kind of cross, a cross that would be different perhaps than yours and mine, but a cross nonetheless. And there are going to be some very powerful opportunities that they will encounter through their willingness to accept the cross. Anytime we're willing to say to the Lord, I don't fully understand, Lord, what you're doing, but I do want to accept it. Help me in my unbelief. The Lord does fill our lives with powerful, powerful graces. And that's, especially, I think, the case in bringing order to our sexuality. I think it's in a day and age like we're currently in, really a kind of sex-saturated society. I think there really is. There are many opportunities to turn our whole being to the Lord, to His mercy, to His healing graces, and to the kind of reordering of our own selves that He invites us to as we become His disciples. So yes, there are real graces here, and I think we need to be engaging ourselves, all of us, wherever there is disorder in our hearts, wherever there are the need for purification, and those who face same-sex attraction, definitely that's an area that they can place into the Lord's hands and receive powerful help and graces.
Tom, thank you very, very much for that. Father Tad Pacholczyk, our guest, it's part of a larger cultural kind of suspicion about the Christ's own teaching on chastity, Father, I would think. That like all of us, there really is tremendous grace in just accepting what the Lord taught about chastity and asking Him to help you live it and trying to live it. But I think many people don't avail themselves of that grace because they think that teaching is outdated.
I think you're so right, Cy. And I think part of the problem has been that we have, as a culture and maybe even as a church, given in on the contraception thing, the contraception issue. And I always remind people, look, if we're saying that contraception is okay, what is it that we're really saying? Well, we're sort of neutering females and, saying that they should be, their fertility is not something important, not something beautiful, and that can be negated here, that in a sense we're saying they should be like men. And what does this do? It takes away this very important difference between male and female. And if, then they are like males, then it makes it that much easier to say, well, then same-sex attraction, is just another variant of that. And same-sex sexual activity, you can say, is sterile sex in the same way that contraception allows for sterile sex to occur. Yes. So, we've, in a sense, stirred the pot here very, very significantly by going into the contraceptive domain and not pushing back against our culture here, as the Lord wants us to do, and to live lives of witness in this arena. And so then these other things naturally follow, that kind of disordered original decision.
Thanks again for that call and that question, Tom. Let's go to Susie in Portland, Oregon, listening on 88.3 FM. Susie, thanks so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Hi, my question is regarding placenta in capsules. I'm about 6 months pregnant, and I've been looking into potentially consuming my placenta, since it's like something that's been going on so much. This is supposed to help with postpartum depression, and it's supposed to help like your uterus go back to its normal size and kind of help with the bleeding after birth and increase milk supply. But something about consuming my own placenta in a capsule that I don't know if it would be right as a Catholic. So I guess that's just kind of my question. What is the church say regarding this?
So, Susie, I do get this question every now and then, and the church has not issued any direct teaching regarding this. But, I would say that first I would issue a little word of maybe caution or skepticism around some of the claims that sometimes are made in terms of the benefits. For example, that this, will make a big difference in terms of averting postpartum depression. I mean, postpartum depression is a complicated, probably multifactorial issue that we don't fully understand its genesis and the origins of it. And, so on for some of the other supposed benefits. But I would also say that to the extent that those are issues of concern in a particular pregnancy, then I think, one should look at other approaches rather than the approach of consuming one's own placenta, even if it has been put into a kind of capsule form. There are other ways to, for example, strengthen the uterus and so on after delivering a child. And so I think it's good to think a little bit more in those approaches. And as I say, there's not a formal teaching here, but I think your sense that this is at a minimum unusual and, perhaps raising just some questions about really whether the motivations are sufficiently serious to support this practice. I think there would be legitimate doubt and debate around some of those claims that are offered.
Susie, just because we're coming near the end and we have quite a few folks on the line, I'm going to leave it right there. I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very much for the call. We're heading to Washington, listening on the Catholic Answers, the new and improved Catholic Answers app. Oscar in Washington, go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
A question about parasitic twin. If they're talking about terminating it, it's not causing problems now, but if it grows further, it could cause medical issues, pretty serious ones. So, where does the church stand on killing a parasitic twin for the health of the other twin?
So, Oscar, these are actually pretty complicated pregnancies sometimes to be able to sort out what types of interventions might or might not be allowable. But we can certainly say, and the Church has always emphasized this, that we may not do an act that is directed to ending the life of another human being by direct means simply to benefit someone else. That would be, for example, having a regular abortion for the benefit of the mother so that she could go to college, let's say. That's an example of something that would not be permissible. The situation with the parasitic twin is that there will sometimes be situations where it'll be possible, for example, to wait to do what's called expectant management and see whether that one twin does die on its own. And I think there will also be some situations where you have some question about whether, in fact, it is a twin that is actually there, or whether it is some other type of molar growth. There are certain things called hydatidiform moles, etc. So, the details are actually going to be quite important. But the bottom line in terms of what we cannot do would be that we cannot ever directly attack one human being in order to bring about benefits to another. So if you have two twins, you would do your best to shuttle that pregnancy, looking out for both of them to the extent that you can. And that may not be possible. It may be the case that both of the twins, because one of them is so dependent on the other, that they may both not survive the pregnancy. That's possible. But it's not going to be acceptable to choose to target one of the babies for the purposes of benefiting the other, to kill one to benefit the other.
Oscar, thank you so much for the question. I hope that that was helpful to you. Also ask for our listeners to pray for you and for the children. Thank you so much for the question. I'm going to go now to Emma in Houston, Texas, listening also on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app. Emma, go ahead with your question for Father Tad.
Hi, Father Tad. My question is around the morality of the sexual act. At what point does it carry a moral aspect? Isn't it? Or how is it different than any other biological needs that we satisfy, like eating or any other? I mean, I understand that even with eating, at some time we can decide to fast from eating for whatever reason, but we don't tell anybody not to eat at all, for the rest of their life. So why is it any different?
Oh, you know what? I'm going to let Father answer just because we're getting near the end. I'm sorry that I interrupted you, Emma. Go ahead, Father.
Well, so Emma, I think here the notion of our sexuality is clearly different than just eating. It's not purely a biological urge, but it's actually got a lot of relational meaning and thickness to it. Relational thickness in the sense that, you get into the thick of the deepest human relationships when you start talking about sharing of sexual intimacy. And that's why the Church has always insisted that this is something so revelatory about the soul of the person, one giving themselves to the other, that this has to occur in marriage. It cannot be a casual exchange like a handshake, just happening out in public, or, and it requires this kind of veil of respect for the sacredness of what we're talking about. And it's also an arena where people get hurt. And I think people who have, experienced this, who have had sexual relations outside of marriage, they often, realize there's a bitter sense afterwards left behind, that they were used. And I think women in particular can recognize this. So this is very different than just another appetite. It touches on some of the deepest aspects of how we can give ourselves to another human being to whom we have committed ourselves for the rest of our lives. And in that sense, it's a very beautiful, very sacred, very powerful reality for bonding two people together and for bringing then forth the next generation of humanity. And that's why the Church really, esteems the beauty of this so much.
Is that a satisfying answer to you, Emma?
It is. It is. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your call. Father Tad Pacholczyk is our guest. Father Tad, we're running up. I don't think I'm going to go back to the phones because we're running right up against the clock here. But the answer that you just gave to Emma, it strikes me that there's so many people who think that the Christian view of sex is somehow a diminishment, but it's not. It's an admission of the glory of the act.
Absolutely. And I think we need to rediscover that, and we need to catechize around that, because really it's the culture that is demeaning of sexuality, not the Church. The Church is trying to lift it up all the time and point out its beauty and sacredness.
Yeah, indeed. If you want to really know about the beauty of and the gift of human sexuality, don't watch Netflix. It's not being glorified there. But
absolutely.
Father, may we have your blessing before we go?
Yes, I would be very happy to. May Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Father Tad Pacholczyk has been our guest. You can find out what he does and access all kinds of great bioethical thinking at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, ncbcenter.org. Did I get that right, Father?
And also, that's right, and also FatherTad.com.
Or FatherTad.com. Good idea not putting the Pacholczyk on there. Much easier on people. FatherTad.com.
You got that right.
Father, thank you again, Father. Tomorrow, 2 hours open forum. Jimmy Akin. We'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.